All right, today I will be sharing about how do you go about doing basic enumeration of Active Directories, right, in a Windows environment. And I'll be going off this blog post right here. All right, so first off, right, one of the most powerful tools of being able to enumerate and gather a lot of this information in a domain environment is the Active Directory PowerShell module. So I'll be going over how do you go about loading that, right? So first right here, I have a PowerShell window right here. And to load it, I will run the let's see if I have, yeah, import module, and then it's going to be Microsoft. So first I have to import module, this Microsoft DLL. So there it imported. And then interesting enough, right? This is a DLL. And usually when you think about import modules, that's usually against PS1 files or PSD-1 files. But in this case, and I haven't done a lot of research here, but my guess is that, excuse me, this DLL is either structured or in a certain way where you could import it, or maybe it's a case where import module in PowerShell, it allows you to import any DLLs. So what is a DLL? That's a dynamically linked libraries. And within those, within the DLLs, there are different powerful methods that it will provide once you import it. So then you could run it. And one of the other things I sort of want to share with you to sort of show you that I'm not doing anything funky. So one of the commandlets that will be available once you import the Active Directory a PowerShell module is this get AAD domain. Okay, so I guess that is available from that. So let me try to find one that I will need the bigger one to get working. So let's try get AD users. Okay, I guess with that DLL, I'm getting almost everything. That's interesting. I'm gonna try to find, okay, maybe this one. Okay, will not have it. Okay, so that looks like it has everything. So it looks like to use this Active Directory ones, that's all you have to import. But the other one that I wanted to also share importing would be importing the this one. Usually, according to the resources I find, you're also supposed to import this one. But I guess a question that should come up now, as sort of we're seeing this, is like, what will this provide? So, but it looks like just by importing that DLL, it's providing me with like all of the interesting ones that I wanted to show for this presentation, right? So by importing that, now we have different commandlets that we can use. Okay, so the first command that I ran previously was this get AD domain. So what this will give us is it gives you what domain is this computer currently connected to. So in this case, let's see here. This is the domain right here, right? techcorp.local. That's the domain that this computer is currently connected to. And the next one, let's get some more information about this. Let's get some more information about this particular domain. So we can go get AD domain, and the identity of this domain is TechCorp. TechCorp. Okay, so this is the domain. So we want to get some more information about it. So there we ran the command and it gave us some more information, right? And the big things we want to sort of show here is like the forest of this domain is, this is what it's called. And within this domain, this is the value of the domain controller. So just some basic information. Okay, so it looks like this is the domain controller right here. And you know, with a previous command, one of the things I sort of did want to point out is this field right here, right? So let's break it down, right? So the way the different structures within Active Directory, the highest one is called the forest. So that's sort of the whole domain, the whole structure is a forest. Within your forest, you'll have these different domains. In our case, so you have different domains, and then under the domains, you will have these child domains. So in this case, right, our forest or our main domain is this techcorp.local, and then this right here, this US, US is a subdomain, so a child domain, or yeah, subdomain of the bigger ones. So I think in future ones, I will sort of share the relationship between child domains and root domains. But these are sort of different important concepts to sort of understand. Forests consists of domains, and then within domains, you could have child domains. And then within domains themselves, there's this thing called an organizational unit itself. So that's the things within domains is these organizational units. All right. So, and then the thing with domains is that for each domain, you have domain controllers, right? So how can you get that information? You could run get a domain controller. So this gives back our domain controller. And in this case, it is active domain controller. It is USDC. This is the name of our domain controller. And if you look at one of my previous values, let's see if it shows there for the domain controller, because I now want to show you the entire path for it, right here. This will be the entire path of the domain controller. So right here, it says this is the primary domain controller, PDC. So this is how you would list it, right? It'll be US-DC, that's the actual name itself. And then the root one for this domain is us.techcorp.local. So that's how you would parse, that fully qualified name there. All right, so we have the domain controller. Other things that we want to get is what are all the users within that domain? And to do that, we can run get AD user, and the filter is, we want to show all the users. So these are all the users in this domain. So what are some important? So right here, right, we have this user called support 39. And another really important thing to notice is SID, the security identifier. So for this user, his security identifier at the very, so what is important is to focus on the very end, 4118. The stuff in the beginning, this is the part for your actual domain, I believe. So I think the first part of your SID is like, what is the domain? And then the last part here, 4118, that is the actual number for your specific username. So that's what that is, right? So another important thing that we should look at is, SAM accounts. So a very important concept is this idea of a computer in a domain. So accounts in a domain versus an account on a local computer. Those are two separate things. If a user is in a part of a domain, then they're a part, so you can see it as like, that user is a part of this network group in a domain. That's the way you can think about it. The other concept is the users and the groups, on your local computer itself. The local users will not be associated with the domain user. That means if you unplug your computer from a domain network and want to log in locally with the accounts on your local system, it will use the local user. So be very clear of that, of group users and groups that belong to the local computer itself versus the ones that belong to a domain. Right. So, and the reason I'm sort of sharing that is that the next concept I want to share. So I'm running the get user command again, but now I want to filter out all the ones with a SAM account name. So the SAM account is a local database for the local computer itself. So that's why I'm running this to see. Let's see if I have a typo here. Oh, sorry. So I needed to put so what do I filter? I filter star. So basically show me everything, and then SAM account name. So these have, so what this is showing us is like all of these users that came back here, they have a SAM account name. So that means within the SAM database itself, right, you can pull information about this user from the SAM account database. And the other thing I wanted to share is the ability of using filters in PowerShell. So for those who don't know, this is a pipe. So basically, if I run this first command right here, get user filter star, that will give me all of the users from that commandlet, right? So that's all these users, and that gives you all these different fields. But say I'm only interested in So this is the syntax here. So I'm filtering it more. I'm piping it to this other command. And so this other command says, for the current entry, give me the one where the enable field is equal to true. So basically, right now, what it's going to give me back is all the users that have an enabled account versus a disabled account, right? So I'm curious, did the previous one show that? Right here. So you see how these different users have these different values here, right? Of enable, right? So there are some accounts that might be disabled. It's like we don't care about the disabled account, right? But more so, I'm showing you this ability of filtering based on field values. So I run that. Uh-oh, got some syntax error. Let's try to control C out of that, and let's try to figure out what is my syntax error here. Dot enable. Oh, sorry, it's not star. It's $. There you go. And what it returned here is all the ones with the field is enabled is equal to true. And I think to like wrap this up, so this is basically sort of a quick walkthrough. Okay, and then the other thing that I sort of want to really show really quick here is, say you're just interested in some of the fields, so just showing the results of some of the fields, you can pick the field. So in our case, I just want to look at the name, and let's say the logon counts. And the other thing I have to sort of show within this other command here is properties, because properties is what will give me the value of the logon count here. So like that, run this. So did it give me the logon count? It didn't. So let's see what my error is. So I put select log. Okay, I logon count right here. There we go. Okay. Oh, interesting. So so it does give me that logon count value right here, right? But my guess is that maybe with my current users, I don't have enough privilege to show this, or like this value isn't set for this version of Windows, perhaps. So that would be my guess. But let's see if we go instead of logon counts. This should work. Nope. Okay, I think there's something else that's happening here. Filter star dot properties description. Okay, let's take away this one. Let's see if the property description works. So I'm not quite understanding why. I think it's maybe the syntax I'm using here with the properties, because I think properties was supposed to give me more information, but it doesn't look like it's doing that right now. I wonder if I do the, maybe that was why I needed to do, let's see, dir import module, active directory, this one. Let's see now if I get proper descriptions. Oh, check it out. Okay, so this is why. It's because the description is blank for all these fields. That's the reason. So so if I did, instead of this that one, let's do, yeah, given name instead. There we go. So that's so it works, right? So I can give double fields, and I get values for double fields. It's just make sure the field you're interested in actually has a value. And I guess in my lab environment, right, I did the description field wasn't set. And the last thing I wanted to show was getting groups. So how can you get groups? So so far we showed how to get users, how to get information about the domain, how to get the domain controller. To get groups, you could go get AD groups, filter star, and let's just see it. So that's how it looks. And if we were just interested in the name, right, we can just do select name, right? So then that shows all the names and all in the groups on the domain. But the reason I sort of want to share this is that for one of my previous demos, I showed you how Bloodhound works, right? So it has to get the information from somewhere. And what I showed today is using the PowerShell module Active Directory. This is how you go about using a manual process of getting all that information. And then sort of a question that should come up to you, as you're seeing this is that why is it allowing me all this information? And the reality of these protocols and these domain systems is that a computer will need to talk to the server, the domain server, to get these informations to make certain decisions. So basically, there are pre-existing protocols for Active Directory to work to give you different services and functionality. And the way it allows it is these kind of information needs to be passed back and forth. And for us as testers, we want to be able to get this information so we can look for weaknesses and misconfiguration, and then prove it through an exploitation or penetration, right? So that's why we're using this information, and that's how you go about getting these information from these tools. So, and I think another important question you should ask yourself is like, is the Active Directory PowerShell module that we're using here, is that a hacker tool? And it's like, no, it's not. And this is a reality for a lot of these so-called hacking tools. They are just normal tools that are very powerful and will, in the hands of like a defender or system administrator, they're necessary to do their job. So to be a system administrator, you'll need these kind of tools to do your job. But for a hacker, an attacker, they will also use that for their goals, and their goals is to find vulnerabilities and to exploit it, right? So they'll use these existing tools, and just because an attacker can use these tools for nefarious purposes, that doesn't mean like the problem is with the tools themselves, right? The underlying problem is with the vulnerabilities, and it's just the way an attacker would go about finding it would be very similar to how a system admin would use these tools to troubleshoot a problem, right? So you sort of have to understand that it's kind of like a knife, right? So you think about the metaphor of a knife. A knife, you can use it for very good stuff like cooking and cutting things, right? Very useful. But in the hand of an attacker, it could be very deadly. But that doesn't mean we should ban all knives, right? So that's sort of just some closing comments I want to sort of share about what are we trying to achieve here, and what's sort of the meanings of sort of these different tools and techniques that I'm using. And so with that, I'll open it up for questions, comments.
Yeah, very great, very good presentation, Candy. So do you mind scrolling up in your command buffer just a little bit to that get AD?
Okay, get AD, this one?
Yeah, no, I think it was the one before that.
Okay, that's
where you were showing the user. Yeah,
users.
So
okay.
this get AD users, right?
Yeah.
So you're saying that as a non-privileged user in Active Directory, I can start querying other objects inside of Active Directory.
Exactly.
Because by default, this is how LDAP, the lightweight directory protocol, it needs to know where these different objects are. So so even not being an admin, I can see what other accounts are like.
Yes. And so I want to sort of add a little bit of more context to some of your comments you made. So number one is that you're right in terms of an unprivileged user can query the domain controller through LDAP to get this information. But this needs to be brought up. That user has to be an Active Directory user. That's really important. You need so it's not privileged. It's not an admin. It's not a domain admin. It's not an admin account, but it is a legitimate domain user. So for instance, if you were just to connect your Kali VM, your Kali laptop into a switch of an Active Directory, right? But you did not have an Active Directory user, you would not be able to query it. Right. So if you had a Kali laptop in this domain, you would have to have the credentials or some kind of credential material for a real user. Then you could talk to the Active Directory server, the domain controller. So that's number one. The other really important detail I wanted to bring up is that you can, as a non-admin user, query the domain controller directly, because like you're saying, LDAP that's how LDAP works. That you need that information for the Active Directory to work. You can query the domain controller for this information, but you can't query other domain computers as a non-admin user. You need admin privileges on these other domain controllers if you want to query stuff specifically on that domain computer. Does that make sense?
Okay, so there was a couple points there that you made that I kind of want to highlight. So being an active user means that I'm an active member of the Kerberos realm. So I have to be able to be granted a ticket in order to communicate to the LDAP controller. But just because I'm an object in the Active Directory forest does not mean that me as that specific object have the permission to know other objects within the forest. Is that what you're kind of saying? So a user has a certain level of view permissions in the forest that a computer does not. That a computer would have more advanced permissions, in that a computer can see computers and a user can see users, but a user, depending on their level, may not be able to see other computers. So
it depends. So the concept I wanted to share was that the domain controller is special. And funny enough, even though it's the most powerful system on your network, it needs to allow queries. So any domain user can query the domain controller. So that is a allowable query that all domain users can do. But the thing is that for other domain computers, so you have all these other domain computers in your domain, unless your user is an admin on that domain computer, you won't be able to query it. Or I think you could set certain permissions to allow specific users or specific groups. That's a possibility as well, right? So we're not talking about that. We're just talking about, just the default settings. You can't talk to other domain computers unless there's a specified permissions to allow that, right? And I think the other comment you're making is more in general in terms of objects and ACLs. And so that's more when we're getting more into details about access controls for all the objects in the domain itself, all the different objects in the domain itself. That's number one. And what was the other thing that I was probably gonna mention about that? Probably stuff about ACLs and access controls. Yeah. Oh no, the other thing was you shared about Kerberos. And again, I think that's going to be a future demo, once we dive in more details about how Kerberos and how tickets works. So that's the implementation of how do you go about getting a ticket and then sharing your ticket so your access is validated on the different systems against the different objects in the domain.
Great. And then one last point, and I think it's here in your buffer about SID.
Yes.
You mentioned something about this SID. Okay, so when I'm actually talking to domain controller, I'm passing this SID, or am I passing all this other information, or is this just this is just kind of the body of extra metadata that is associated with that specific object?
Okay, so there's a lot of potential questions there. So according to the question that I'm hearing from you is that if me as a user, say, I'm sort of Bob, my domain user is Bob, and I'm trying to get an information from this domain controller, you're asking what SID, am I sending an SID to that domain controller to get this information back?
Yeah. So over LDAP, do I send, is an SID associated with my message request?
Okay. So I could only take a guess at it right now. I'm gonna have to do more. It's been a while since I sort of kind of knew it roughly previously. But again, I think that's going to be within our talk when we get deeper to Kerberos. Because I think how it works is that I have to go to the Kerberos server, which is probably going to be the domain controller, right? And I'm going to have to ask it for a ticket for a certain thing. So in this case, it's asking for a ticket to probably view all of these users, right? So it's going to ask, hey, here's my SID and whatever kind of credential material, and then the Kerberos server, the DC is like, okay, I know who you are. I'm going to give you a ticket, and then it's going to give you a ticket. And I don't know if within that ticket it gives back to me, it will have the SID. But I think what it does have, it has the cert for the ticket grantor, and then therefore when I then send this to the person I'm interested in, which funny enough in this case is the domain controller, it will check that ticket and says, okay, I see that you got this ticket from the Kerberos server, you're good, I'm going to give you all that information. Right. So I think in the back end, in terms of all the nitty gritty detail back and forth, that's actually how it works. But again, I'm going to have to do more research for a future video, because right now I don't have a clear understanding of how Kerberos interacts with LDAP, right? And then LDAP is maybe just exactly the way I described it of how I was working with Kerberos, or it's doing something else under the hood. I don't know those details.
Very good.
Yeah.
Well, this is a fantastic demo. I certainly learned a lot, and I really appreciate you taking the time to start diving deep on this.
Yeah, definitely. And just now I'm sort of interested in playing a little more around with Active Directory stuff. So it's really fun playing around with it and sharing what I know, because I imagine it's going to help a lot of people, because it's a big help for me. So awesome.